Hey everybody, today I have 9 tips for the Flutter beginner. I've been developing with Flutter for about a year now and have released a handful of apps on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, all built with Flutter. Hold on, let me check to see how many.
Yeah, about a handful.
So I figured I'd make this video just sharing general tips of things I've learned while developing with Flutter. Okay, that's enough of an intro. So here we go. Tip 0. Don't give up. I was going to make this the last tip, but I feel it's more appropriate at the beginning, because you're probably new to Flutter or Dart, but you may be new to programming in general. And when I started with Flutter, I wasn't new to programming in general, but I did find Flutter kind of annoying to learn at first. But the more you do it, you do get used to it. So it's just a matter of learning and keeping with it, and eventually it just becomes second nature. And overall, Dart with Flutter is a pretty easy language to learn, but it's not going to happen overnight. If you have something to build, just stick with it. You're going to get frustrated. It's going to annoy you, but the more you keep going at it, you're just going to eventually learn it, and you're not even going to notice that you're learning it. But just keep with it and you'll get it. Tip 1. Make sure your computer can handle it. When you're building with Flutter, you're going to be testing your app on an emulator. Emulators are phones that run on your PC where you test and build your app. So obviously, the beefier the PC you have, the more smoothly Flutter and the emulators will likely run. So you may have a hard time building and running an application on a
Crappy laptop.
I'm not saying it's impossible, however. After you start watching tutorials, you'll see how fast Flutter actually is with hot reloads and hot restarts, and be able to make that comparison to the computer you're using. No matter which IDE you use, which we'll get to in a second, you're going to need to at least use Android Studio for the emulators. Some say you can use the Android SDK command line tools for the emulators, but if you're new to Flutter, it's just easier to download the entire Android Studio suite. And you'll see here that Android Studio recommends 4 gigabytes of RAM, but recommends 8. And the emulators have their own requirements above the Android Studio ones. Either way, give it a shot, see how it runs, and then go from there. Tip 2. Follow the setup instructions. Don't just go downloading Flutter all willy-nilly and expect it to work right out of the box. The Flutter website provides instructions on how to install it on your OS. And it's not hard, it's just easy to bypass, so just follow the instructions to avoid running into issues down the road. That was an easy one. Next, tip 3, find your IDE. I was initially going to name this tip Use Visual Studio Code instead of Android Studio, but I figured I'd just let you decide on which one works better for you. I've used both, and I personally prefer Visual Studio Code over Android Studio by a lot. And I feel that most Flutter developers tend to use Visual Studio Code too. If you're brand new to Flutter, I would suggest you use Visual Studio Code to start. I think it has a cleaner interface, it's easier to understand, and also it's prettier. Again, these are my opinions, so form your own. But remember what I said back in tip 1 is that you're going to need Android Studio anyway for the emulators. But VS Code integrates the emulators in their IDE, so you don't really need to use Android Studio at all. Tip 4. If you plan on developing for iOS, you need to get a Mac. In your internet travels, you may find some workarounds for this, but I cannot attest for how well they work, and I would be extremely surprised if they actually did. I personally use a Mac Mini for developing for iOS, and it runs everything fine. If you're new to Flutter or app development in general, I would learn that first before you went out and bought a $1,000 Mac, just because some idiot in a YouTube video said you needed one. But then again, hey, you gotta spend that stimulus cash on something. Tip 5. Have a basic idea for an app to make. I would suggest just you have something small in mind that you'd like to build. That way, while you're learning Flutter, you can take these pieces of information that you're learning and be able to apply that to your own idea. But I'm not suggesting you take 2 months to come up with this perfect app idea. Just try to come up with something small and basic. If you don't have an idea, that's fine, because Flutter gives you a basic application to start with when you create a new project, and you can just modify that to your heart's content. It's actually a pretty good starting ground. If you don't have any ideas, I'll give you some now. Garage door stopwatch, screen activated stock ticker, fake alarm clock, invisible flashlight, infinite basketball bouncing sounds, Chevy Cobalt tracker, light switch on off counter, number of times Amy Schumer made me laugh counter, number of times Trevor Noah made me laugh counter, neighbor child in my yard automatic police caller, fall activated soothing sounds player, pocket activated video recorder, Californian exposure notifications, dating app for houseplants. Tip 6. Get a basic overview before jumping in. This depends on your learning style, but Flutter's YouTube channel has a ton of resources, especially the Widget of the Week playlist. When I started, I watched a ton of these to get an overall feel of how Flutter worked, and I found these to be extremely helpful, especially since I was pretty new to app development. Check the link in the description to go check these out. Tip 7. Be organized. Now, if you're developing for Android and iOS on a Mac, you don't need to be concerned about this as much, because on a Mac you can use both Android and iOS emulators, but you can't use iOS simulators on a PC. Since my Windows PC has better specs than my Mac, I do the main bulk of developing there, and then when the Android side of things is about done, I move the project to my Mac and begin testing for iOS there. I'm a one-person team, so I don't necessarily need to worry about version control so much, but I do have to keep track of what the most current project is. You don't want to move your project from Windows to Mac and then forget you did that and then end up working on an older project. So what I generally do is once I move it to a different system, I delete it off the old system. That way there's only one copy in existence. I know some Flutter developers use Git or GitHub for version control, but in my case it just isn't necessary. Tip 8. Be happy with your peripherals. This is more of a general programming tip. First thing that makes a huge difference is having more than one monitor. I find 2 to be manageable, 3 good, and 4 to be the most ideal. When you're dealing with at least an IDE plus an emulator, it's a lot easier to let them have their own screens. Otherwise, things get lost behind each other and it becomes just more annoying. The second thing is have a decent keyboard to type on. I prefer mechanical keyboards or mechanical-ish keyboards, but use whatever feels right for you. I personally can't stand mushy feeling keys, so when I use a keyboard with keys like that, I have a hard time actually typing. I use a cheap fake mechanical keyboard I got off of Amazon, and it's my favorite keyboard to type on. Now don't go out and buy 3 monitors and a $200 keyboard because some idiot on the internet told you to. These are just a few general tips of things I've learned over some years of coding. And that's all I got for now. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below. Hopefully something in this video helped you out or clarified something. I'm going to try to come up with some new Flutter ideas for videos. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.